She walked down the aisle in white, her hands trembling. The chandeliers cast perfect light across the ballroom. Her dress cost more than some people earn in a year. The music played. Her groom smiled. For exactly 3 minutes, everything was beautiful. Then someone laughed. One of those laughs that travels through a room like poison. It was his uncle, leaning toward his sister with a sneer. His sister covered her mouth, but it was too late. The bride saw it. She saw the way they looked at her. She saw the whispers ripple through the hall like fire. One guest turned to another and said it loud enough for her to hear. "She doesn't belong here." In that moment, something inside her broke. Not her heart. Her silence. That was the instant everything changed. A woman humiliated before hundreds. A bride left standing alone on her wedding day while her own groom stared at his shoes. But within 48 hours she would do something so bold, so calculated, so devastating, that a $5 billion empire would collapse overnight. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Who was this woman they were mocking? Why did they think they could destroy her on the biggest day of her life? And how could she possibly have the power to ruin a $5 billion business empire in just 2 days? These are the questions everyone would ask when the news broke. Because you see, sometimes the most powerful people in the room are the ones who are quiet. Sometimes the most dangerous revenge isn't loud. It's silent. It's calculated. It's professional. Before the scandal, before the collapse, before the tears and the lawsuits, there was love. A beautiful, genuine love story. But there was also a secret. A secret that would change everything. Her name was Victoria. She was 29 years old. She started with nothing. Her father was a mathematics teacher who believed that education was the only inheritance he could give his children. He worked 16-hour days to send her to university. When Victoria was 22, right after graduation, her father had a heart attack. He was gone in minutes. The doctors said there was nothing they could have done. Victoria stood in a hospital hallway, holding her little brother's hand, and she made a promise. She swore that she would never let poverty define her family. She swore that she would build something. Something real. Something powerful. So she did. She worked 3 jobs while building a fintech company from her bedroom. 11 years later, that company was worth hundreds of millions. She had investors from around the world. She had respect. She had dignity. Then she met David. He was the heir to the Okafor dynasty. His family owned pharmaceutical companies, real estate empires, luxury hotels across 3 continents. David was different from his family, though. He was gentle. He was curious about people. He didn't care about pedigree or old money or who your grandfather was. When he met Victoria at an investment summit in Singapore, he was honestly impressed. She was presenting her company's quarterly results, talking about market expansion, speaking with confidence that made the room lean forward. When she finished, he walked straight to her and asked her to have coffee. That was 5 years ago. He fell in love with her intelligence first. Then her kindness. Then her humor. Then everything else. For 5 years, they built a life together. He stood by her side at board meetings. She celebrated his achievements. They planned a wedding. They planned a future. But in David's world, old money never just accepts new blood. Bloodlines matter more than character. Education matters more than achievement. And a woman who built her own fortune? That was a threat. 3 weeks before the wedding, David's mother invited Victoria to tea. They sat in the family's drawing room. The mother smiled, but there was something cold in her eyes. She said, "Your company is doing well." Victoria said, "Thank you." The mother continued, "But you understand that after the wedding, you'll step back from the board. Women in our family don't work. They raise children. They support their husbands." Victoria felt her chest tighten. She said, "With respect, Mrs. Okafor, I'm not stepping back from anything." David's mother set down her teacup. She said quietly, "You're very ambitious for someone like you. For someone like you." Those 5 words told Victoria everything she needed to know about how this family saw her. That was the beginning of the war. During the rehearsal dinner, David's uncle made a toast. He was a little drunk. He stood up and looked at Victoria and said, "You know, my brother's daughter married a street trader before she became a businesswoman. That trader used to sell vegetables at the market. I wonder if Victoria's family had similar, humble beginnings." The room went silent. It was technically a joke, but everyone knew what he meant. Your people don't belong here. Your background is inferior. You climbed your way up, and you'll never be one of us. Victoria felt David's hand squeeze hers. She looked at him, expecting him to say something. He didn't. He just looked down at his plate and took a sip of wine. That silence was the moment everything died. On the wedding day, as she was walking down the aisle, she could hear the whispers. His aunts were talking about her dress, her makeup, the way she walked. Not compliments. Assessments. Judgments. And then came the uncle's comment during the family's traditional speech. "Well, she's certainly a woman of many talents. Self-made, they say. I'm sure that's very impressive." The way he said it made her sound like a novelty. A circus act. His sister actually snickered. And David still said nothing. He sat there in his perfectly tailored suit, and he said absolutely nothing. When she looked at him, expecting some defense, some acknowledgement that his family was wrong, he looked away. In that moment, Victoria understood something fundamental. She understood that David loved her, but he didn't respect her. And she understood that marrying into his family meant spending the rest of her life being tolerated, but never accepted. She understood that love without respect is just another form of weakness. After the ceremony, she walked out to the reception line. She greeted people, smiled for photos. But inside, something had frozen. That night, after the party ended, Victoria sat alone in her hotel room. And she did what she had learned to do years ago when her father died. She made a decision. She didn't cry. She didn't fall apart. She made a plan. The next morning, Victoria was on a conference call with her board of directors. She was calm, professional. She discussed quarterly projections and market opportunities. Nobody listening to that call would have known that she had just walked away from her wedding night. Nobody would have known that she was heartbroken. They only knew what she wanted them to know, that Victoria was focused. 17 years earlier, when Victoria was still in university, she had been recruited by a venture capital firm to work on a project. That project was to invest in emerging fintech companies across Africa. The Okafor Group, David's family business, was one of Victoria's company's largest investors. In fact, Victoria's company had been negotiating a merger with the Okafor Group for 6 months. A $5 billion merger. 51% ownership would go to the Okafor Group. 49% would stay with Victoria's board. The deal was supposed to close in 4 days. 4 days after the wedding, Victoria's company was the deciding vote on whether that merger would happen. She controlled the board. Nobody else had that power. Most people would have kept the personal and professional separate. Most people would have signed the deal anyway, even after being humiliated. That's what David's family was counting on. They expected Victoria to be heartbroken and impulsive. They expected her to either stay in the marriage and accept their terms, or disappear quietly, devastated. What they didn't expect was for her to be neither heartbroken nor impulsive. They didn't expect her to be strategic. Victoria met with the board. She showed them financial projections. She showed them that the Okafor Group had been making risky investments that could have endangered the merger. She showed them that there were better options. International investors from Asia and Europe who were interested, and who had been waiting in the wings. She suggested an alternative strategy. Instead of being acquired, her company would grow independently. It would go public. And the international investors would get a higher percentage. The board voted unanimously. Victoria had built enough loyalty, enough respect, that they trusted her judgment completely. She had earned that trust through a decade of excellence. It couldn't be bought. It couldn't be taken away by a wedding dress or a mean comment. It was real. The press conference was held on the morning of the 3rd day after the wedding. Victoria wore a tailored navy suit. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup was perfect. Everything about her was controlled, professional, powerful. The room was full of journalists, investors, financial analysts. David's father was there too. He had come expecting to sign documents and celebrate his new acquisition. He stood in the back of the room with his legal team, smiling. When Victoria walked to the podium, that smile faded. She began to speak. She spoke about her company's impressive growth metrics. She spoke about the strength of her team. She spoke about new partnerships. And then she said the words that would echo across financial markets for weeks. After careful consideration and analysis, our board of directors has decided to move forward with an alternative strategy. The proposed merger with the Okafor Group has been terminated, effective immediately. We have secured superior partnerships that will provide significantly greater value to our stakeholders and employees. We wish the Okafor Group the very best in their future endeavors. The room exploded. Journalists started shouting questions. David's father stood there, his face turning pale. Within minutes, the news hit the financial markets. The Okafor Group had lost a $5 billion merger. Investors panicked. Questions were asked. Analysts started looking more closely at the Okafor Group's financial structure. What they found wasn't pretty. The company had been overleveraged. The partnership with Victoria's company was supposed to solve that problem. Without it, the company was in serious trouble. Within 48 hours, the Okafor Group's stock price had dropped 37%. The media started reporting that the company might face bankruptcy within 2 years if they didn't make dramatic changes. The woman they had mocked for being self-made had just cost them billions of dollars, not through revenge, but through professional excellence. The same woman they had looked down on for climbing her way up was now the reason they might fall down. David called Victoria 2 weeks later. He was devastated. He asked to meet her for coffee. They sat in the same cafe where they had met 5 years before. He started crying before he even sat down. He said, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know you were that powerful. I didn't know you could just destroy us." Victoria looked at him carefully. She had thought about what she would say if this moment came. She had rehearsed it in her mind 100 times. But now that she was here, she said something different. She said, "It was never about power, David. And it wasn't about destroying you. It was about respect." He asked what she meant. She said, "You loved me enough to marry me, but you didn't love me enough to defend me. You weren't willing to stand up to your family for me. You wanted me to accept their disrespect and just smile and become less. I couldn't do that. Not for anyone." David wanted her to forgive him. He wanted her to come back. He said that he had finally stood up to his family. He told them he was leaving the company. He was taking their disrespect with him. He was choosing Victoria over them. But it was too late. Because the truth is, sometimes apology comes too late. Sometimes when someone shows you who they really are, you believe them. Victoria was kind when she declined. She wasn't cruel. She just said, "I hope your family learns from this. I hope you learn that love without loyalty is just an illusion." They never married. David's family had to sell off company assets to maintain their position. The Okafor Group recovered, but it took 5 years. The scandal nearly destroyed them. But the real damage wasn't financial. It was spiritual. A family that had been united by pride and privilege was fractured forever. Victoria's company went public 2 years later. It became the most valuable fintech company on the African continent. She became a billionaire in her own right. She used her wealth to create scholarship funds in her father's name, funding education for thousands of students who came from backgrounds like hers. She never spoke publicly about David or his family. She never gave an interview about the wedding or the merger. She just kept building. She kept creating. She kept proving that your background doesn't determine your future. That humility isn't weakness. That silence sometimes speaks louder than any scream. One day, Victoria visited her father's grave. She sat there quietly and she whispered, "I did it, Papa. Not for revenge. Not for power. I did it for dignity. I did it because you taught me that character is the only inheritance that matters. I did it because you showed me that a humble beginning doesn't mean a small ending." She was quiet for a long time. And in that quiet, there was peace. Because she finally understood that the best revenge isn't loud. It isn't expensive. It isn't about making someone else suffer. The best revenge is becoming so successful, so powerful, so genuinely excellent that your silence says everything. So here's what I want to know. If you were Victoria, Would you have given David another chance? Do you believe love can survive betrayal and pride? Or do you think some lines, once crossed, can never be uncrossed? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I'm genuinely curious to know how you feel about this story. Many of you have walked away from people you loved because they didn't defend you when it mattered. Many of you know exactly what it feels like to be humiliated by someone you trusted. So how would you have handled this situation? What would you have done differently? Would you have fought harder? Forgiven faster? Or would you have done exactly what Victoria did? If this story hit differently for you, if it made you think about your own relationships and your own worth, then you already know what to do. Like this video. Subscribe to our channel. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because stories like this aren't just entertainment. They're reminders. Reminders that you deserve respect. That you deserve someone who will defend you. That your worth isn't determined by anyone's approval but your own. And if you think this story was powerful, wait until you hear what happened when a poor woman married a billionaire CEO, only to discover his entire family was built on dark secrets. Stay tuned because next week, we're bringing you a story that will shake you to your core. Subscribe so you don't miss it.